This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I'm your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com with links to my social media accounts, my columns back at the Colorado Springs Independent once a month now. Also, the other podcasts we've done, my photography website. And don't forget, you can help support this podcast at Patreon, patreon.com/hikingbob. Help support the podcast. And one last thing, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter, which comes out once a week. It's completely free. You can just go on the website there, the Contact Me link, and you can either send me an email if you have a suggestion or sign up for my newsletter. Today, my guest is Keith Thompson, who is and correct me if I'm wrong, the executive director of the Colorado Springs Mountain Bike Association.
That is correct. Hey, Bob, thank you very much for having me on.
Glad to have you on here, Keith. And you guys, we'll just start with the beginning. You guys are a very new mountain biking group in Colorado Springs.
That is correct. In fact, I just got news last night that our 501c3 nonprofit status has been approved by the IRS. So we are a very new nonprofit, but we launched in March of this year, of 2023, and TOSC, Trails and Open Space Committee, acted as a fiscal sponsor for us to get off the ground.
Great. And now you're your own 501c3.
Yeah, starting today.
Awesome. So you can send them your donations and get a tax write-off.
Absolutely.
And self-support them. So I guess the obvious question would be, we've got a number of mountain biking groups in town. Why another one?
We do. In fact, there's another one. There's several clubs. There's several organizations. Friends groups within the Pikes Peak region have a pretty major presence of mountain bikers on those different groups. And still, I think the mountain bike user group of open spaces and parks is really so large that there's still, I think there was a very broad feeling that a lot of riders at different levels didn't feel necessarily represented by the groups that exist now. So definitely felt like there was a need to better represent a portion of mountain bikers who have felt a little bit out of the circle.
Okay. And I would think, you sit back and you take a look at the city, 500,000 people, millions of visitors a year. It certainly seems like there's plenty of room for more than one group.
There is, but I think even more, the reason is that really Colorado Springs is a mountain bike town. It is seen as having some of the most amazing terrain for mountain bikes in the world, and that is not overstating it. One thing that really sets us apart is that we just have such a variety of terrain, from sandstone to the kitty litter in the canyon, and everything in between. And so we have just a variety of trails that makes this really a prime location to ride a mountain bike.
Okay. So, we kind of talked about why, but what makes your group, or makes Colorado Springs Mountain Bike Association any different than any other group? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think that one thing that sets us apart is really a focus on getting to trails, working on them and maintaining them specifically for the city. That's something that has really set us apart. Right now, we're about to reach 1,000 hours of trail maintenance that have been done on mountain bike trails within the city. Right now, we're really focused on one.
Pretty good for a group that started in March.
Exactly.
And we're in July.
Yeah. And so I think that's a good indicator that this was needed, right? A lot of riders feel really connected to this and feel like this is something that was needed, and so they feel a deep desire to support it. But the kind of what sets us apart, I think it's that trail element of really wanting to get back to working and maintaining on the trails that we use and ride. I think there's a strong feeling that we're not putting enough effort in giving back to our parks. And luckily for us, Parks has been more than happy to take on that volunteer work and have us help them out on trails and in areas that are of huge need for them.
Great. So give us an idea on, I don't know if you have a mission statement or something like that, but what actually would be your mission then as in the group?
Yeah. So we have a vision statement and a mission statement.
Okay.
The vision statement really describes, we see Colorado Springs as working towards being a world-class destination for mountain bikers. our mission statement really comes down to 3 components. It's building community and identity around what it means to be a mountain biker in the Pikes Peak region. It's trail work, trail development, and maintenance, and then stewardship. Stewardship is a very big part of what we see ourselves doing in taking care of just the beauty of our open spaces and making sure that the use that we are using does not outweigh what we're putting back into it to try to make it a better place. So those are the 3 elements: community, trails, and stewardship.
Okay. So you said you're working mostly with the city Parks Department, Colorado Springs Parks Department?
Yes. Yeah. So we started, really in the midst of a lot of just animosity and just broken relationships with city parks, the city parks department, as well as mountain bikers. And I saw an opportunity to try to heal that relationship and kind of start fresh. And we started with the city. And what I think was amazing, they came with just complete authenticity and a desire to restart those relationships. And they have demonstrated that now that we're 6 to 8 months in, and they continue to. So we're developing a lot of great relationships there, and we're hoping to extend that to U.S. Forest Service as well. And we also have those relationships that we're building within the county office as well.
Well, they gave you 1,000 hours worth of work to do, so they must be okay with you guys.
Exactly.
Yeah, so It seems like they gave you plenty to do.
Yeah.
What areas are you guys working in? What parks would we recognize or trails we recognize that you guys are working in?
Yeah, the trail we're really focused on and that Parks has asked us to really put a lot of our effort is a new trail. It's an advanced level trail in Pulpit Rock open space, which is part of the larger Austin Bluffs open space. That trail, it starts from the saddle right behind the main rock, Pulpit Rock, and it drops down on the south-facing slope of the rock, and then empties right in front of the rock, about a third of a mile down, and then meets into the Lori Cohen trail below it.
Okay,
it's a bike-only, downhill-only trail. And we've put a majority of our effort and work into that. I think part of it is it's a trail that we feel like is needed in the community, but more than that, we want to fulfill our commitment to finish that trail completely with volunteer effort and 100% community-driven approach in building that trail. So that's really what we've focused on, but we've now expanded to Ute Valley, as well as Palmer Park, and we plan to do work in Stratton and the Canyon as well. Okay,
so I guess it's pretty interesting. I've seen this little shift in the Parks Department where their thinking had been for many years, all the trails need to be multi-use, and that's a lofty goal, and it's a good goal. I think it's good because there's a certain economy of scale. You build one trail, you make it usable for everybody. But if you want that gnarly kind of downhill experience, you can't make a hiking trail that does what you want for the cyclist. And certainly horses are not going to like that.
Yeah.
So I've seen this little shift where they try to drop in these bike-only trails. They built one in Ute Valley Park. And, there's a plans for when we get the quarry that there's going to be some bike-only stuff in there. So now you have one in the Pulpit Rock / Austin Bluffs open space. I kind of see that's a good, as a hiker, I'm fine with that. If you guys want a bomb down trail, as long as I have a trail that might be nearby. And we also did that in Stratton open space with the Chutes Trail. And then you built I think it's called the Gold Camp Trail next to it so that, because if you tried to hike down that Chutes Trail, it was just dangerous. But for cyclists, it was great. But for hikers, so they built a hiking trail next to it. I kind of like that there's an accommodation that we're going to give the cyclist when we have room and when we can be done, a pretty good gnarly trail that they can just go bombing down on, and the hikers and the horses may have a different place to go that's safer for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to acknowledge that. I think you're spot on. At the same time, I do want to acknowledge what I think is a great ethos by Parks, which is that commitment to the multi-use trail. I think that's an excellent approach. I see Parks, and they've described this to me, kind of transitioning from really heavy recreational use to being a little bit more conservation minded.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great approach, and we want to be part of that and help in that process. And mountain bikers are mindful of that conservation element and the stewardship element. We want to be part of that from the very beginning. And I think a multi-use approach to that is critical to the conservation element. What I'll tell you in terms of the single-use, single directional trails, it's not just Colorado Springs. We see this happening really nationwide. Denver just came out with a trail that has been really popular. It's downhill bike specific within a much larger network as well. And there was massive success. I think you're seeing the same thing here. And but it's a very small percentage of trails within each open space, and I think that's the right approach. Mountain bikers, we don't want trail conflict, in the same way that anyone else does, and so the downhill only or bike only trails provide us the opportunity to really stretch our bike to the limits and our own performance to the limits without fearing that we're putting anyone else in danger or causing any conflict that we're not looking for either.
Sure. And, looking in your guys' shoes, you don't want to spend thousands of dollars on a bike with crazy suspension and just ride it on a flat trail. Right. You're kind of not using your bike to its limits, I guess, or even to its full extent. Why have all that stuff if you're going to ride on a pretty benign trail?
Exactly.
And I don't think anybody wants there to be a bike-only trail right next to every hiking trail, because then you're just spider webbing everything.
Right.
But I like where they can, and they can fit one in,
mm-hmm.
and it doesn't create this big spider web and way too much more trail. That you can fit one in every once in a while. That's kind of a good thing. I would appreciate that. I think if I were a cyclist, the multi-use trails I think are the way to go to make them adaptable for everybody. But when you can squeeze one in for specific use, I think that's okay.
Yeah. I think one element too, Bob, that you will see happen with this kind of new approach with the, single-use trails is that done right, and I think when you have nonprofits and organizations who are willing to put time and effort into it, you're going to see a lot more ownership and investment, personal investment in those trails. We're seeing it with Black Sheep. We're seeing it with a particular trail in U Valley called Nachos that is mountain bike heavy and shoots as well. Mountain bikers feel a deep ownership over those trails. And, as an organization, we get more requests to work on the bike-specific trails than any other trail around.
Oh, because those trails are yours. So
exactly.
So these trail names I'm not familiar with. Where's the Black Sheep Trail?
So the Black Sheep Trail
the one you're building?
Is the one that we are building specifically in Pulpit Rock Open Space. We started on that in November of 22, and we're about to finish it up, I think probably August, September timeframe.
Okay, pretty cool. And Nachos is in U Valley Park?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not familiar with all those names. Are those going to be the official names on the list?
Yes.
On the hiking side thing.
That's a good question. Black Sheep is the official name.
Okay.
I don't know that Nachos is.
There was discussion at a meeting I was recently at about the problem is trying to figure out what trails people are talking about, because everybody has, the Forest Service has trail numbers, which are just a confusing jumble of numbers. And then the Parks Department has their official names. And then everybody else has their own name. And if you go you look at somebody else who goes, I don't know what that trail, that's this trail. Well, why don't you just use that name? But everybody has a different name for things.
It's true. Riders, we use Strava segments as names. So in Red Rocks Open Space, they're doing a lot of work. And when Parks would say we're doing a lot of work on the overview or overlook trail,
right.
Riders, we didn't really know what they were talking about.
Right.
If you say Santa Claus or 719,
right.
That's how we identify those trails.
Yeah. Gotcha. I did a short class on the Cotrex, the state's Cotrex app, and one of the questions I got was, are those the official names? And I said yes, because they're put on there by the land managers. Those are the official names. Now, your app may have something different, but these are the official names. But nonetheless, it's just good to know what all these different names are. So you guys have been in existence for a very short period of time. You've done a lot of work. Where do you see yourselves going forward? I mean, eventually, one would think we've built all the trails. Now, we are adding more parkland. We have the quarry and the buffer space near Blodgett Peak, the south side of Blodgett Peak, still to be developed. City just bought 1,000 acres of land on the east side of town that eventually be developed. Fisher's Canyon eventually will be developed. Do you see your guys having a lot of play or a lot of input in what goes on? I don't want to say influence. I don't know if that's the right word, but a lot of input in what's going on there?
Absolutely. I think in all of those cases, and especially Pikeview, mountain bikers are looking for experiences in all of those open spaces, including is it Coral Bluffs on the east side of town?
Well, no, it won't be Coral Bluffs, but the Wild Horse Ranch,
Yes,
which I've been
Wild
told
Horse
is
Ranch.
probably not going to actually be the name.
Apologies.
There's not a wild horse anywhere near there.
Okay.
It's what it's been called up until
I'm
now.
a West
but
Sider. I don't know the...
Yeah, it's been called Wild Horse, but I guess everybody's saying there's not a wild horse to be seen out there, so we're probably going to eventually name it something else. But nonetheless, that's what it was called.
Yeah, we absolutely would love to have input on that, but also we want the city to see us as a group of volunteers and individuals who they can count on, not only for the input side, but to put some sweat equity and work into it. We know that, finances are tough for them as well, and so they need all the volunteer help they can get. And so we're just coming from it from the standpoint of, hey, we'd love to pitch in and provide that that help as much as possible. I think to answer your question of, eventually we are going to build all the trails, I think you're right, but we'll still be there to maintain them and really, there's a lot of conservation work to be done as well. Trails are constantly being widened due to mud or braiding, and so we see ourselves going in and helping trails to kind of reestablish them as they were meant to be. And so we're targeting that sort of work as well. So that'll be a big part of what we do in the future.
Okay. How big is your membership?
Right now we're closing in on 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a very small group still, but you're brand new.
Exactly.
You're brand new. A lot of people may not have heard
For
of
4
you yet.
months.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty good.
I think 1,000 hours in a couple of months is just outstanding. So I'm pretty impressed with that. With that. Let's talk about the 800-pound elephant in the room.
Sure.
We did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, Kevin and I, about some issues with some groups interfering with workers in the Pike National Forest. And it's probably a little unfair to point specifically at cyclists, and to be fair to my point, when the word came out this is happening, there were cyclists mentioned in there. And I would like to think I made a point that this doesn't represent all the cyclists in the community. This is probably a very small percentage. But I'm not a cyclist. I'm a hiker. I've hiked in that area. I know the area very well in Bear Creek. I hiked it before the massive amount of work was done to reroute it to protect a very rare endangered fish that's in there. Give me your perspective on it, being from the cycling community. Give me your perspective on what you think is happening there.
Yeah, the 800-pound gorilla.
And I wanted to avoid it, but I just don't think we can. But I want your perspective on it. What you think is going on there?
I don't think we should avoid it. It's a great question. There's a lot. I've got a few things to kind of provide on that. I think one thing to keep in mind. So the trail what we're discussing is closure of trails on Mays Peak related to the watershed and protection of the greenback trout. It's important first to remember that the individuals who were making threats, I think this came from a place of emotion. I think it came from a place of not understanding what was exactly happening. But to their credit, they also did not have any communication, no understanding of what was happening. And many of those individuals, they don't know anything about a greenback cutthroat trout. Right. They don't know about the watershed discussions that happened, I think, 8 years ago.
10 years, yeah.
Yeah. And so for them, all they know is that people are up there with chainsaws cutting down live trees across their trails that they use. Many of them did not know that these were non-system trails. In their mind, they're system trails. So I think all I'm saying is that there is a broader, I think we need to look at this a little bit more broad than, hey, these are a bunch of hooligans making threats to vehicles. At the same time, COSIMBA does not, we do not condone any sort of threat. That's obviously not acceptable. And we are asking people to contact the Forest Service as a way to push back, and that is their duty and their right
Sure.
as residents of the city. And I think that that's the right approach to take. Yes, this is a small percentage of people, but I do think it's important, Bob, to at the same time reflect that right now there's a petition floating around in the mountain bike community that has over 800 signatures on it. And so this is clearly, from the mountain bike perspective, not an issue around a few, small group making a big uproar. This is seen as a taking away trails issue. I'm not condoning that. I'm not saying that's the right perspective.
Right.
But in a complete vacuum of communication and even relationship within the mountain bike community with Forest Service, I think that it's to be expected that people are going to be confused and quite angry that to them their trails were simply taken away. It's not correct, I think, to suggest that that this punished road builders. It punished riders, and I do think that that's important that our city knows and hears, and I think it's important for Forest Service and to some degree RIMFE to hear as well.
Yeah, and to be fair, I never objected to anybody having an objection to the work, and by all means, I think it's appropriate for people to address the proper people for it. The people out there doing the work are not the people making the decision.
Absolutely.
But if you want to march down to the district ranger's office and have a discussion with the district ranger, one of his representatives, that's appropriate.
Correct.
And I've hiked all over Mays Peak, and I'm sure that when I hiked up there, they were not system trails because how was I supposed to know the difference?
Right.
So I can sympathize with the cycling community in general having concerns. Not with that small group. And I think we'll agree that their behavior was inappropriate.
Sure.
But in the group that you have a petition, I think that's appropriate because that's going to get the attention of the Forest Service. And maybe it's just a public education campaign. Maybe they need to sit down and go, well, for those of you who have not been here for 10 years, here's what transpired 10 years ago, and here's where we're at now. Here's how we got here. And maybe a little better education on their part. And, I'll be fair, with the Forest Service is sometimes not the greatest PR organization. And also to their defense, recently they've added a lot of public affairs people to the office in Pueblo, and they are doing a little better job of getting the word out. And I'm seeing that they're beginning to recognize that they need to get the word out better so that people have a better understanding. Not just all of a sudden you come out there and people with chainsaws cutting trees down. What are you doing to my trail?
Right.
And a little better education to get there. So I think we can be in agreement that it is our right. And actually a duty as citizens. I think it's our duty to ask questions of our government officials.
Yes.
Why are you doing this? I want an explanation.
Yes.
And they have a duty to reply to you.
Yeah, and I think the comment you made was there needs to be some sort of better kind of campaign, right? That communication campaign around it. I would argue, though, that that's half of it. I think the other half is a relationship with the user group. Right. To better understand the needs of that user group. And I think if they did that actually would go much farther in helping all of us relieve the issue around building road trails than it is to turn their backs on a user group that uses their forest to a significant degree. I think it doesn't take much for them to ask the question, why are these trails being built, where they're being built, and what are we seeing, how mountain bikers are using the forest, and how can we accommodate that? In conversations with us, they've been very kind of apologetic in terms of the communication. So I think we see a real desire to improve that. But on the other side, there's not been a deep desire to build that relationship with mountain bikers that we've seen from the city. And so that's disconcerting. And yeah, my hope is that they will see that we'd love to come and help them with trails. The Pikes Peak Plummet, from the mountain bike perspective, is such an incredible resource for our city. And, mountain bikers do work on that trail illegally. And we've got to get to the point where a relationship with Forest Service allows mountain bikers to take care of that as an asset for the city, and puts it on the map for us in big ways that can really help the city. But I think that relationship component, it doesn't exist, and we've got to get to that place where we have that built with the user group.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to point out one thing, too, about rogue trails. And you and I had a discussion earlier about some stuff completely off topic. But when El Paso County recently did their master plan redo, it was last winter, of Homestead Ranch Regional Park. And it's a beautiful park. Not necessarily a mountain bike heaven. It's kind of flat. But I love hiking out there and being out there. One of the things they recognized in their master plan was some of these, and they didn't call them rogue trails, they called them social trails. I think if it's not an official trail, it's a rogue trail, but that's neither here nor there. They recognize in their thing that maybe some of these rogue trails are probably okay. And if they're sustainable and they're not damaging anything, then maybe we just adopt them. I'm not saying that's necessarily the issue in Mays Peak. Mays Peak is very steep. It's a lot of screed. There's a lot of runoff from there. It does need work. I'm not saying that's the case there necessarily, but sometimes I think we, as a government in general, and I'm not pointing the finger at any agency or any level of government, I didn't put that trail there. I don't want it there. I'm going to close it. But instead of sitting back and going, well, how did we get that trail there to begin with? And is it an okay trail? And if it's a historic trail, and I can point to a couple trails that are here for 100 years or more that are not system trails, but you go out and look at them, they're okay.
Right.
Maybe we don't need to be in a hurry to close them if they're not doing any other damage or anything like that. And I know I'm being kind of trying to hit all the points here, but sometimes we just need to take a step back and go, is that trail hurting anything? Then maybe we're okay with it.
Yeah, you're speaking like a mountain biker here, Bob.
Oh God.
No, you're exactly.
I'm thinking
right.
like a hiker. I want to go out and enjoy these trails. I hiked up Mays Peak a bunch of times before all this was going on, years and years ago. But yeah.
I think too, what I'll add to that is that from a mountain biker's perspective, I think that there's a sense with land managers and people who have a sense that these road trails exist, that there's this group out there digging new trails all over the place. That's actually not the case. When we talk about riders going out to do trail work, honestly what they're doing is going out to maintain the trails they love that were built as a road trail, like you said, 100 years ago. That's the case very much with Blodgett. That is not, Fence Line was not a trail built by rogue mountain bike trail builders trying to build a new trail.
That trail's been there I've hiked it for 30 years.
Exactly. So there are individuals going out who maintain this trail, and we're calling them rogue trail builders. So I think, and from their perspective, they see themselves as doing something positive for the community. They see themselves as protecting that. And even though it may not be seen as a system trail, in their mind, it should be. And I think, to some degree, like you mentioned, that there's room for that.
To be fair, though, there were some trails built in Blodgett open space that were truly recently built, and they were completely rogue trails.
I believe you.
There were. I mean, I've seen them myself when I've been out there. Yeah. But on the other hand,
that number is very small.
It is very small, but it was still illegal. Yeah. So I want to make a difference. I don't want anybody going out there building a new trail and then expecting the Forest Service to adopt it or the city. But there are some trails that we've talked about that have been there for 100 years, and maybe we really shouldn't be going out there maintaining it, but people are looking and go, well, I've been hiking this trail I've been hiking some of those trails. I didn't know if it was system trail or not. They're not marked either way. Right. So I'm out there hiking this trail that's been out there that, ranchers probably used early on or something like that. Yeah. But we have to recognize that at a point we do hire these land managers to take care of the land for us. That's what we pay them for. That's their responsibility.
Absolutely.
And maybe there's a renewed effort to start closing trails. It hasn't been in their ethos for a long time, and all of a sudden it is. Mm-hmm. So there's a culture shock there. I get it. That trail's been here for a bazillion years. Now you want to close it?
Right.
Maybe a little better education would probably help people understand why that's happening and why there's a renewed effort on it. So,
Bob, we started by saying, hey, if you provide the opportunity for us to work on a trail that fits our this writing and what we're looking for, I think what you'll find is a massive decrease in the number of people who are going out to maintain trails, not according to parks policy and things like that.
Right.
And that has very much been the case.
Right. And again, I'm not condoning anything. If you're out there building a brand new trail today, stop it. You're not supposed to be doing that. If you're out there maintaining a trail that's not an official trail, you're probably going to get yelled at by somebody. You probably shouldn't do that either. We want to make it clear, I'm not condoning that, but I kind of get how people get to where they are. And
right.
if they don't know who to talk to, or they're not hearing from anybody,
and they don't feel heard,
and they don't get any guidance, then there's an issue there and I think we can say that, you can point the finger at the Forest Service and say, we're not hearing from you, but how many people have gone to the Forest Service and asked them either? Right. Probably not a big number. Right. So, it's a two-way street. I want to be fair to everybody here. But I appreciate your perspective on that whole issue that's going on there. I definitely do not want to demonize all cyclists. I want to make this very clear. This is a tiny percentage of people. And I think you and I are on the same page with that.
Okay. 100%.
Cool. So we got that 800-pound gorilla out of the room.
Yeah.
But it was necessary. We just could not ignore it. We had to talk about it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about moving forward. We kind of touched on it a little bit. You want to be part of new things. Where you guys are building the Black Sheep Trail in the Pulpit Rock. It looks like it's going to dump down near UCCS and sound like probably butt up against UCCS property. They've been a partner in that whole project.
Correct.
So where do you see that going? That's going to be done in another month or so. Where do you guys see you guys going after that?
Yeah. After Black Sheep, we will continue to work in Austin Bluffs. We have built a great relationship with Ranger Mark Tatro there, and he just really I think feels like he gets us.
I know Mark. He's a good guy.
Yeah. And he does incredible work throughout our city. The number of properties he manages is pretty intense. We are a part of the Blodgett master planning process, and we have told parks that we will be a part of anything that they want to build out there, whether it could be a volunteer fashion. It could be a small contract fashion. We're looking to expand and just be a service to parks as much as possible, and a partner in what they want to see and what the public wants to see in Blodgett. We'll be a part of the Fishers Canyon master planning that I think potentially could happen later this year or 24.
It's in the budget for 24.
24.
Yeah.
Okay. And Pikeview is the one that we're really looking forward to. Pikeview is the scar that the city is talking about, creating a bike park there that would be dedicated for bikes. That's something that, of course, is really exciting in our user group and for our constituents, and will be a major part of that.
Yeah, they're waiting on the reclamation work to get done there and then decide whether they're going to accept it or not.
Yeah,
you don't want the thing to fall off the side of the hill.
Absolutely.
But I've been out there, just as a side note, I've been out to Pikeview and taken a look at it. The reclamation work being done there is tremendous.
Yeah, I have not made it up there yet.
It is really, really tremendous work they're doing there. They're trying to because they want to get rid of the property, and they're not going to get rid of it if we don't accept it. So
I've noticed when I talk to park staff about it, their eyes light up and they get really excited about it. So it tells me that it's something really to look forward to.
But with cautions, like I said, we're not bound to accept it, but we will if it's done to our and a lot of other people, federal government approvals and state approvals and our approvals, and whether we think it's safe enough and everything. But
and the community approval too.
Yeah, the community seems to be anxiously waiting for it.
Yeah.
So that seems like that's going to happen next. What are you guys doing on the public education side? I know you're a small group and you've got a lot of stuff going on. Are you able to do any public outreach yet, or are you kind of working into that? Where you at with that?
Public outreach. Are you thinking like in terms of educational, civic education, or
however you would define that?
Yeah. Public outreach. I think when I think of that, to me, I think there is a big need to help riders understand parks, their ethos, and where they stand on a lot of open space issues. I think that once they better understand how parks are managed or open spaces are managed, that they will be much more on board with that process, and they will understand their role in that process, because they very much have a role and they want that role. So I think that that's how I would define that, the public outreach. That is very much a part of our mission and where we want to go. Right now, we're really focused on trail work because it's summer. So I think you'll see that some of that public outreach and that kind of civic engagement, I think probably in the winter months when we're not riding as much, start to see that. But right now,
Makes sense.
as you know, we're just still trying to get off the ground.
Sure.
And so we are, everyone in Cosimba is a volunteer, including myself. And so we only have limited margin, and we're trying to make the best decisions we can with limited resources. But as we expand and grow, you'll see us go into that public sphere a lot more.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but it was obviously a question I had, wanted to ask about, where you guys are going from here.
Yeah.
I think what you guys are doing is great. I like your attitude towards things. Seems to be very positive, and let's get this stuff done. When you have an issue, address it in the right way, which I think is very important. I would also recommend to not only your group, but to anybody interested to, go to your park advisory board meeting, go to your TOPS working committee meetings. The agendas are put out several days in advance. If you see an item on there that may affect you as a cyclist or a recreational user or as a hiker or as an equestrian, to come to those meetings and let your voice be heard. We, as my position on the TOPS working committee, we're there to represent the community. And if we don't hear from you, we're going on what we hear, and we try to do a good job of outreach and listening to everybody, but we need to hear people come to our meetings and address us and get their concerns on the record.
Absolutely. I see a gap there between riders and leaders like yourself who have provided a lot of service to our community in open spaces and parks. And I see us filling that as much as we can. I think riders would like to get involved. They don't always know how, but having something like Cosimba in place to help them be aware of when the committees are meeting, hopefully provides you that input and perspective that informs your decision making a lot in a better way as well.
Great. So tell us how people can find you guys. What's a website, social media, email? How can people find you and get in touch with you if they want to contribute or volunteer or come out and work or whatever?
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, we now have our 501c3 status, so any gifts that are given to Cosimba are tax deductible. Our website is cosmba.org. And they can also email me personally at info@cosmba.org.
Great. You guys have social media yet, or you're still kind of working into that?
We do. We're on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, great. Anything else you want to tell us about the group? I think it's been a great conversation. We got to know you guys, got a little clarity on some issues that are pressing right now in the public. Anything else you want to tell us?
Yeah, I think, Bob, what I would say is just to kind of put a bow on the final part of our discussion. We see a big need in that civic engagement perspective with mountain bikers specifically. And so I think what I'm really proud of is just the really positive relationships that we've built with all of park staff, the county park staff, and Forest Service. So we're going to continue really leveraging those relationships and the commitment that we are making to trails as a way to advocate for mountain bikers in the Pikes Peak region towards the trails that they want to see and they want to ride. Sometimes there's some distance there between the trails that are built and what kind of expectation of riders. But the best way to address that is get more people in the room, exactly what you said, and help them understand the decision-making process and how to engage in ways that are impactful. And hopefully we're providing that to the city. We hope we are, and that's the goal moving forward. But man, I'm also I want to tell you, I'm super grateful for the service that you've provided to Park Service and the relationships that you built and the way that you serve our city every day.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
It's appreciated.
Yeah, well, I love being out there. I love helping out and do whatever I can, if nothing else, just to bring some people together. So, with that, Keith Thompson, the Executive Director of Colorado Springs Mountain Bike Association, newest mountain bike group in town. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Bob. It was an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast.
Before you go, did you know you can rate and review our Studio 809 podcasts? That will help us because our egos really need to have thousands and thousands of listeners. But that helps our wonderful sponsors reach more ears too. And we do love our sponsors. So just go to Studio 809 or any individual 809 podcast in your iTunes or podcast app and click on ratings and reviews. Thanks.